I'm joined in studio by UCT's Graduate School of Businesses, Professor Kaushik Sutran. He's going to speak to us about business opportunities, believe it or not, that can be brought about by load shedding. Prof, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, what we're going to speak about today almost sounds counterintuitive, because what we're experiencing is businesses reporting operational losses because of load shedding. But you believe that there are actually business opportunities to be made despite the blackouts.
That's correct, yes. I don't think we're looking for them in the right places. And, just to give some background context to the problem, we've known since 2002 that we're going to outstrip supply.
Right, so this isn't a big surprise.
It's a big surprise. Just take as an analogy Germany, which since the nuclear disaster that happened in Japan, they've committed to eliminating all nuclear supply from their supply system, and they're very far down the track. So, they didn't have a disaster; they just acted out of moral integrity to do so. So, I don't know. There's something that's wrong with the way we're approaching this problem. Perhaps that since 2002, we only started load shedding in 2007, and in 2011 we started getting the private sector involved in becoming suppliers of power. But for me, it's a lack of seeing the opportunity that has happened since 2002, and now we sit with almost in crisis mode again, expecting Eskom to be the sole supplier, and I think it's just unrealistic. Right,
as we speak, the country is in stage 2 of load shedding, so we're already one up from stage one, and many businesses are without electricity, and we're really realizing that there needs to be an alternative. So what are those alternatives? Are we calling for privatization of electricity? Are we calling for independent electricity producers? Where should we be going?
I think the idea of independent electricity producers is well accepted. I think if you look at the Western Cape as an example, it's pretty accepted here. There's an environment being created to bring in private production. Similarly, with the City of Johannesburg's statement, I'm intrigued and happy by it because it now sounds like a singular project. It's no longer something that's happening on the side. There's a firm commitment that they will try to get off the load shedding schedule.
Let's talk about that for a little bit. So what you're referring to is that the city, Joburg City Power, has announced that they are making serious moves to move themselves off the load shedding schedule. Now, of course, Johannesburg being Africa's economic hub, this is a big deal. It really is. But realistically, can we expect this to happen?
I would say we shouldn't bother about it being realistic. We should bother about it being a primary project. I think if we're looking to see whether they'll be on time, it's the wrong place to look, because they will be late. There will be lateness. There will be delays. They're working with a very complex phenomena of looking at multiple technologies being integrated into one supply system. And that's a complex problem. So if we're trying to measure it as a fail or a success, I think we have to change the way we look at this problem. I think we ought to see it as a venture towards newer business models, newer policy making platforms, because all of that has to be considered as the innovation in as much as the technologies are the innovation. What we're struggling with at the moment is identifying that really we have an organizing problem in as much as we have a technological problem. So, if you talk about resolving our current electricity crisis, it's partly technological, but it's also partly business model and organizational. And I think when you try to move the focus there, then you're talking about the role of management and leadership.
And that's, of course, your main area of interest at UCT's Graduate School of Business. Now, often when we look at the problem, like you said, we finger the engineers, Eskom, and the technology and power units. But really, we can be implementing good business practices that could help us either get out of the situation or make the most of it.
Yeah, I firmly believe, if you look at the situation in Chile put down a strategy for 2050 to say how they would resolve the energy crisis, and they realized they're going to have to be playing with a number of players and they're going to have to be playing with a more heterogeneous system with multiple players and multiple business models. So they're not looking for the one super policy to fix this or the one super entity to fix this. They want a network of cooperating entities. That's a more complex system of governance. I don't think they're far off from the truth of how those kinds of problems should be managed, because you're looking at an emergent reality, not one that is linearly planned, like you have telephones being invented and you have a whole society of people adopting them. I mean, the very things we are trying to use to resolve our energy crisis are going to grow in maturity. We're going to get more efficient at using them. And those business models are going to be fluid. Who's going to play the harmonizing role of putting all of these together into the mix and the recipe for what will resolve our power needs? That's what we ought to be asking the questions about.
And what is the answer to that? I know it's a difficult thing to predict. Do we imagine government being in that role, sort of mustering up civil society and private industry? Do we trust government in that role, considering... I
think you can trust the people, whether they are aware of how much the system limits them from doing what ought to be done is the question we ought to be asking, because I think there's people, very good people in responsible positions, but not necessarily aware that they're dealing with an emergent problem, but using very linear, very mechanistic ways of thinking about this that are not agile. It's not in any way expecting the emergence that is going to happen in practice. So what is that? It's organizational for me, and it's management and leadership. Because the technological side is gathering pace. It's moving along quite fluidly. I'm quite confident technologically the world's moving along. Whether we are doing the same organizationally, leadership-wise, and policy-wise is for me the issue.
In fact, during the State of the Nation replies recently, our Minister of Public Enterprises, Lynn Brown, asserted what you're just saying, and that's on a technological front, we're getting there, we're doing well. We are building new power stations, we're looking into nuclear energy and certainly some type of renewable energy. So let's focus on the running of those entities. Is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, it's the running of those entities, it's the integration of those entities with independent power suppliers, with multiple business models. I mean, that's a kind of an ecosystem of innovation. So, do we have the people who can be with those problems in the complex ways in which we'll find them? I don't think so. We're looking for very simple, single fixes, and it's not going to necessarily be there.
Now, earlier in our discussion, you mentioned Chile, and we're certainly not the first country to be facing a challenge like this. And you, in the past, have cited Brazil as an example of a country that was facing a challenge. Ours is load shedding. Theirs was an oil sanction or embargo, and they made it work. Speak to us about that example, and tell us why it's relevant to us.
I think it's relevant to us because they. Not out of choice, but they had an imposition of sanctions in the 70s where the OPEC or oil-producing nations didn't want to supply oil to a government regime that was not democratically put in place. And they decided that we will, on our own, resolve this internally within our national boundaries, and started to think about alcohol. And they had a national project of trying to produce alcohol and alcohol vehicles which use combinations of alcohol and ethanol, and so they have a very hybrid economy made up of, a lot of biogas and other supplies of electricity. So they've become real masters at producing ethanol from sugarcane and etc. So they're well prepared out of a real disaster. I personally don't think that we've made enough of the organizational issues that we have to resolve.
Now, what we're speaking about really is South Africa becoming a solutions-based economy and country, really, where we work out the solution to our problems. But in order to do that, we need a certain amount of business graduates, of science and technology graduates. Do you see that as something that will set the foundation for us to be able to move forward in this way?
Absolutely. If you look at the executive MBA I convene at the Graduate School of Business. It's focused specifically on business model innovation. And business model innovation is not putting primary the technology, it's putting primary the logical, rather we'd say the common sense regime that you're trying to build a business around or a revenue stream around. And those are the things that have to be reinvented. We sit in a world which is living well beyond its planetary boundaries, and I think you're going to need more and more newer business models. And what we're experiencing as a power crisis is very visible, but equally we're having an ecological crisis that's not so visible. It's occasionally visible. But you need an ongoing pursuit of these problems and a higher level of consciousness to pursue them. So for me, the problem really is about leadership. It's about the authentic leadership which we've got to approach this with.
Well, we'll certainly be keeping an eye on our private sector leaders and our government in the coming years, in the hopes that there will be some type of solution-based management in the country.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.